Christ is risen.
Indeed he is risen.
You may be seated. Last Sunday, Pascha, the Sunday of the Resurrection, was a day to proclaim what we believe, to celebrate what we believe. But now we come to this Sunday, which you notice in the chant insert is called Low Sunday. It's not as low as it could be, but it's not quite like it was on Pascha in terms of the number of people. But we've come to the beginning of the hard work, the work of coming to understand what it is we mean when we say Christ is risen. One of the fundamental decisions we have to make is it meant metaphorically or is it meant literally? Is it just spiritual, as if spiritual wasn't quite real, or is it physical and bodily? One of the things that you will discover if you look at ancient Judaism, Second Temple Judaism, the Judaism of the apostles, and the pagan worldview, is that neither of these groups, Jews or non-Jews, Jews or Gentiles, no one believed in the resurrection of an individual. This was not part of the picture. They did have the concept, the Jews did have the concept of resurrection in their theology, although it was quite peripheral to the central adherence to the importance of keeping the 613 laws of the Torah. But they did not understand that there would ever be the event of the resurrection of an individual. We'll look at this a little more clearly in a couple minutes. It is essential for us to recognize that the first Christians were Jews. And one of the things that occurs is that after Friday till you come to Sunday, something dramatically changed in the Judaism of these men and of the women that were involved in the mystery of the resurrection. I'd like to just review 7 modifications that almost instantly took place from Friday until Sunday. There are modern biblical scholars, New Testament scholars in our universities and seminaries that believe that the process of coming from death to affirming some kind of resurrection was a long period of development. As the apostles attempted to try to make sense out of Jesus' death. That is not the picture that we have from the record of the New Testament. From Friday to Sunday, something dramatically changed the way these Jews thought, that separated them from the rest of the Jewish community in first century Palestine. I'd like to look at these 7 modifications. Jews, whether they be Pharisees or Sadducees, believed that there was some form of possible life after death. They got this idea from the Babylonians when they were in exile. Prior to that time, the concept of life after death was not a central concern of those who followed the Jewish religion. From Friday to Sunday, all of a sudden, resurrection, life after death, becomes the central tenet of this little group of Jewish people. Second modification is that some Jews, the Pharisees, believed that there would be bodily resurrection at the end of the world. Sadducees did not believe this. From Friday until Sunday, all of a sudden, this group of Jewish men and women believed in bodily resurrection now. Not something that would take place down the road at the end of the world, but it had occurred in their own time. The third modification that takes place to typical Jewish belief is that almost everyone in the ancient world believed in ghosts. Somehow those that have died can somehow, under certain circumstances, communicate with those who are still alive. And if you take a group of people and talk to them, you can find people even today that will tell you that they've had an experience that they describe as ghosts. From Friday until Sunday, all of a sudden this group of Jews said, not that Jesus was a ghost, but they said that he had been raised as a body. That out of the original body that they experienced with him, God had refashioned a transformed body, what later Paul would call a celestial body. This is a concept that is completely foreign to any sect within first century Judaism. A large segment of Jews, the fourth modification, a large part of the Jewish community believed that there would be some resurrection of the righteous at the end of time. And now all of a sudden resurrection had occurred in the present. Central to being a good Jew, and this was a concern of those first Jewish Christians, is obedience to the Torah, to the law. From Friday until Sunday, something changed. And now the central concern of this little band of Jewish believers is what has been called collaborative eschatology. That we are not, it's not the keeping of the law, but it is the implementing of this new life that has been revealed. This new life that has been revealed through Christ's resurrection that becomes the purpose of the life of the righteous. When you look at resurrection as a metaphor for some phenomenon, almost all Jews of the first century used the metaphor of resurrection to describe the revitalization of the Jewish community. What we read about in the 38th chapter of the book of the prophet Ezekiel, the raising of the bones. It was all about Israel. From Friday till Sunday, Easter Sunday, all of a sudden, resurrection as a metaphor becomes associated with ritual washing. That we are baptized into his resurrected life. That we are born again. This isn't something that occurred over a long period of time. It was almost immediate, this understanding. The last modification that is important to see with the first followers of Jesus is that no Jew in all of the Jewish world believed that when the Messiah came, that is the promised one, who would bring the end of Jewish oppression, the oppression of the Jewish people, persecution of them. No Jew believed that this Messiah would die, let alone be raised. From Friday till Sunday, all of a sudden, this little group of Jews began to proclaim that Jesus was the crucified and risen Messiah of God. The purpose I had in going through these 7 modifications is to, I hope, convince you that resurrection was a new thing. That it wasn't something they expected. And that the belief in the resurrection occurred almost instantaneously from the cross to Sunday morning. Since the Enlightenment period, that's when we went into darkness intellectually, there have been attempts at various explanations of how they came to believe in this resurrection. One of the common ones is that Jesus didn't die on the cross, that he was taken down and was nursed back to health in a couple days so that he could wander around and make himself known to people. Anyone who has seen the movie The Passion of the Christ would know that a Jesus who had come this close to death but had survived the flogging, the crown of thorns, the sword in the side, the nailing of the hands and feet. This, if he were to have survived this and been able to stagger into the upper room, he certainly would not have been regarded as someone who was victorious. Another common explanation is, the women went to the wrong tomb. They went to the wrong tomb and they became histrionic. Well, it would be very easy to correct that, to go, you went to the wrong tomb. A third possibility is body snatching. It was very common in the ancient world. People were buried oftentimes with valuables that were important to them. You know, the vast majority of the population, 90% at least, were poor. There was this little slice at the top that were very, very wealthy. Well, it was very common to go to the tombs of wealthy people who had died and try to see whether or not some valuable item was buried with them. Unlikely that this is the origin of the proclamation that Christ has risen. A very ingenious explanation is that when they went to the tomb, they were met by James, the stepbrother of Jesus, and they mistook him for Jesus. This is actually in books by people who call themselves scholars. And then there's the phenomenon of cognitive dissonance, which is you want something to be true, and you want it to be true so much that even though the situation around you fights against it, you somehow convince yourself in some weird way that what you want to have happened, happened. Unlikely that people would want to die for such mental gymnastics. And then there is the argument, well, you know, he only appeared to believers. So of course that's the explanation, that it was people who believed he was alive, that were saying he was alive. Well, they weren't believers. The first apostles at that time of his resurrection were not believers. They believed that it had ended, that all their hopes and dreams that they had tied on to Jesus' life was over because he was dead. And then there's the most common one of all that is being embraced by every heterodox group in the world, by many, many, many liberal Christian denominations. He was spiritually alive. He was alive in their hearts. That's not going to be the foundation upon which someone lays down their life for this proclamation. So I want to take a minute or two to look at today's account. Unfortunately, poor Thomas gets the name Doubting Thomas. He didn't doubt, he wanted some evidence. There's quite a difference. And let's look at the account. First off, they tell him after Sunday, the first Sunday, Easter Sunday, they tell Thomas, who wasn't there, he seems to have a problem. He's never there when he's supposed to be. We have seen the Lord. They didn't say we felt the Lord. You know, it was just kind of like he was almost here. You know, we remembered things that he said. No, they said we've seen him. The word that is used is the word for the images that we receive through our eyes. We have seen him. And then we have Thomas saying, unless I'm able, it's not good enough to see it, I have to touch it. I have to have evidence, not only that he is alive, not only that he is bodily alive, but that it is indeed Jesus. I have to see the evidence of the nail prints and the wound in the side. He just didn't revive because he was able to do something that was quite extraordinary. He could appear in a room when the doors were locked. So a door was not a barrier to his presence. But he wasn't a ghost, because after being invited to touch his body, Thomas was able to declare, "My Lord and my God." Jesus was a real person with a real body that had been transformed into a celestial body, and that he was really there. And Thomas was able to affirm that he was the Lord, the one who at the burning bush said, "My name is I am who I am." That this Jesus is God. Jesus said to him after this, "Is it because you have seen me, Thomas, that you believe? blessed, happy, fulfilled are those who believe even though they have not seen me. On this second Sunday of Pascha, I want to suggest to you that there's seeing and then there's seeing. Yeah? There's two kinds of seeing here. There's seeing because we are using our eyes and we're able to see something and say this is a pew, it's made of wood, it's solid, we're able to see it. And then there's another kind of seeing, a much subtler kind of seeing, a much more mysterious kind of seeing, a much more glorious way of seeing. There's a prayer that I like. Be present, O Jesus, our great high priest, and be known to us as you were known to your disciples. Make yourself known to us as you made yourself known to your disciples in the breaking of the bread. There's another account in Luke's gospel of the disciples that are walking on the road to Emmaus. And they encourage Jesus to stay with them for supper when they arrive at their home in the village of Emmaus, and he does. And they're breaking bread at the table, and Jesus breaks the bread. It's like a pita bread. He breaks the bread. And all of a sudden it says he disappeared. And what is it that they say? They run to the apostles and they say, we have seen him. We have known him in the breaking of the bread. That's where we saw him. That's how we know he was real. We experienced him when he broke the bread with us. Brothers and sisters, the Lord has given us a great doorway into his presence. He has given us a very special way of accessing his presence among us in the Holy Eucharist. If there is any prayer that we need to utter today, it is the prayer, be present, O Jesus, our great high priest. As you made yourself known to the apostles, make yourself known to us in the breaking of the bread. I believe that he is here today. And I believe that he wants to make himself known to us. Let us, all of us, implore him to remove the cataracts from our spiritual eye, from the eye of our soul, so that we might perceive him today. As surely as Thomas perceived him. And when we receive the bread and the wine that has become the means of his presence, that we will be able to say with Thomas, my Lord and my God. Christ is risen.
Indeed he is risen.